Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a deep, really focused look at one of the absolute most fascinating chapters in biblical literature, Genesis chapter 8. So, to truly wrap our heads around what's going on here, we kind of have to rewind and remember where chapter 7 dumped us. I mean, we were left completely suspended, just water in literally every single direction.
Just imagine the sheer tension of that scene for a second. You've got this wooden box just bobbing out there, floating over a completely submerged earth. We're talking 150 days of water, and absolutely no sign, zero indication that anything is ever going to change. That is 5 months of a drowned world in total, eerie silence. It feels incredibly final. But then, the chapter kicks off with a phrase that literally changes the entire game.
Then God remembered Noah. I want you to really hold on to those 5 incredible words, because they are the definitive hinge that this entire flood narrative swings on. The whole story pivots right here.
Which brings us to our first section, the turning point, where God remembers.
To really get why this is such a massive turning point, we've got to look at the Hebrew word behind our English translation. That word is zakar. Now, when you and I hear the word remember, we usually think of it as, just the opposite of forgetting. Like, oh, right, I forgot my keys. But God didn't suddenly wake up from a nap and realize, oops, Noah slipped my mind for 5 months. No, zakar actually means to act definitively on a commitment. It's covenant language. So when Scripture tells us God remembered, it actually means the time for covenant action had finally arrived. He turned towards someone in total faithfulness and actually did something about it.
And we see this concept popping up all over the rest of the Bible. God remembered Abraham, and because of that, he rescued Lot. He remembered Rachel, and she conceived. He remembered his covenant and pulled Israel right out of Egypt. Actually, think about the thief on the cross. He asked Jesus to remember him. He's not just asking to be kept in Jesus' thoughts, he's asking for action. He's asking for mercy. So back in Genesis 8, God remembered Noah. Means the alarm clock has rung. The moment for action is here. And I just love this detail. The text explicitly points out that God remembers every living thing, all the animals too. The whole rescued creation is wrapped up in this promise.
Let's jump right into section 2, the world made again, a new creation.
Okay, so with that huge turning point established, the story really starts to pick up speed. And as it unfolds, I want you to keep Genesis chapter 1 playing in the back of your mind, because what we're watching here is absolutely incredible. Genesis is actually actively replaying the creation account in the exact same order. Think about it. In Genesis 1, the Spirit, or in Hebrew ruach, meaning wind or breath, hovers over the waters. In Genesis 8, God makes a wind, a ruach, pass over the earth. Day 2 of creation, that was the separation of the waters. Here, the fountains and windows of heaven are stopped. Day 3 brought dry land. In our chapter, the mountains are suddenly seen and the ground dries up. And finally, that original creation blessing to multiply, it's mirrored perfectly here. This isn't just a story about a receding flood, folks. It is a deliberate, massive theological reset. The flood essentially unmade the world, and now God is making it all over again.
Noah steps out onto this freshly washed world, and he receives the exact same commission that Adam got. Be fruitful and multiply. It's a total do-over. The story is quite literally starting from scratch, a full recreation of the world, following the exact same sequence and using the exact same words.
Moving along to section 3, the raven and the dove, and a beautiful lesson in patience.
Now, before Noah actually steps off that ark, there's this really beautiful narrative sequence right in the middle of the chapter that we just have to slow down and appreciate, because it highlights Noah's immense, incredible patience. Walk through this timeline with me. So the ark comes to rest, right? But Noah doesn't just kick the door open and run out. He waits. He waits 40 days. He sends out a raven. Then he sends a dove, which finds absolutely no resting place. And pay attention to this super tender detail in the text. Noah physically reaches out his hand to gently draw that tired little bird back into the ark to himself. I mean, in a chapter all about this massive cosmic recreation, we get this quiet pause for an image of a man gently pulling a tired bird to safety. It's amazing. Then 7 days later, the dove brings back a freshly plucked olive leaf. Life is growing. And 7 days after that, she finds a home and doesn't come back at all.
So what's the big takeaway here? Just look at the profound patience Noah has. Even when he can plainly see that the ground outside is dry, he still doesn't leave the ark. He waits. See, Noah entered the ark when God said, come, and he is only going to leave when God explicitly says, go. The entire rescue operation, from start to finish, runs totally and completely on God's perfect timing, not on Noah's schedule.
Let's look at section 4, an altar of worship, the very first act.
Which brings us to the moment those doors finally swing open. Pay close attention to the very first thing Noah does the second his feet touch dry land. He doesn't build a house for his family. He doesn't go plant a field for his crops. No, the very first thing he builds is an altar to the Lord. He takes some of every clean animal and bird and offers burnt offerings. And hey, remember way back in chapter 7 when God explicitly told Noah to bring extra clean animals? This right here is exactly why. God had already provisioned the exact materials for this act of worship a whole year earlier, long before the judgment even fell.
And then we get God's response. And honestly, it contains a pretty startling theological twist. God commits to restraint. He says he will never again curse the ground in this way. But in the exact same breath, he openly acknowledges that humanity hasn't actually changed. He says the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth. Think about that. The flood washed away a corrupt generation, sure, but it didn't fix the corrupted human heart. God knows exactly who we are, and yet, he promises restraint and mercy anyway. The fundamental problem was never going to be solved just by hitting a reset button and removing sinners.
That leads us perfectly into Section 5, Seed Time and Harvest, a truly cosmic promise.
That realization of God's unmerited, totally undeserved mercy brings us to this final, sweeping promise about the natural rhythms of our ordinary, everyday world. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest shall not cease. Stop and think about what that actually means for your daily life. Every single spring that follows a cold winter, every sunrise that breaks through the dark, every harvest that comes after planting, these aren't just, meteorological weather cycles. The text is basically telling us they are a daily sermon. They are a profound, everyday display of a promise being kept. It's God's faithfulness on display 24/7 for everyone to see. As we wrap up the analytical side of this explainer, this is the core thing you should take away. We are now living in a stable world. Is it a perfect world? No, definitely not, because the human heart is still exactly what it is, but it is a world securely held by God. God has bound himself to mercy with crystal clear eyes about exactly who and what we are, and he's committed to sustaining a world that he knows is going to keep breaking his heart.
And finally, Section 6, a closing prayer for reflection and worship.
The source material for our explainer today actually ends with a deeply emotional response to all these truths. So let's just anchor all of this in a closing reflection together. Father, thank you for those 5 words. God remembered Noah. Not that you had forgotten, but that the time to act had come. Thank you that in the incredibly long waiting, when the waters were still raging and literally nothing seemed to have changed, you had not lost sight of him. And, by extension, you have not lost sight of us. Thank you that you made the world again, and that your promise of seed time and harvest still holds this very morning. And thank you most of all that you committed yourself to mercy while knowing exactly what we are, that you did not wait for us to change before you promised to be faithful.
Teach us to worship first, as Noah did, and to move on your timing rather than our own. That right there is the lingering challenge for all of us. When the floodwaters of your own life finally start to recede, is your first act going to be one of worship? And are you willing to wait for God's green light, his go, even when you can already see the dry land right in front of you? Let that thought really sit with you today.